Rec Room used to be so cool, man. I mean, remember how much fun it used to be? Rec Room's gotta be my most played VR game of all time, or at least top 2. In fact, it's probably in my top 5 most played of any game of all time. It just used to be so much fun, which is really what I want to talk about in this video. We'll get to how bad the game is and how they fumbled being one of the greatest VR games of all time, but for at least the start of this, I want to talk about why it used to be so good. I've been playing VR for nearly 7 years, and I've been playing Rec Room for nearly 6 years. In fact, I could pinpoint the week and maybe even the day I started playing Rec Room, because a month after the Oculus Quest 1 launched, my friend got one for his birthday. Rec Room was one of the only games we could play because the Quest library was so small back then, and multiplayer VR games were rare, let alone ones that were cross-multiplayer between PC VR and Oculus Quest 1. The day we started playing Rec Room, we fell in love with it and played pretty consistently off and on until I want to say about the end of quarantine when kids started having to go back to school. Rec Room had a gradual decline from a peak around when the Quest 2 came out, which was in late 2020, I believe, and it became super noticeable after we stopped playing consistently, because every time we'd come back to the game, it just got noticeably worse and worse. I mean, even like a couple of weeks ago, we get on and now they're selling this pay-to-use AI robot, but enough with the negative stuff for now. Why was Rec Room so much fun back then? I think the biggest reason is that Rec Room had a theme, and they stuck with it. And the most fitting way I can think to describe that theme is casual sporting in a college environment. I mean, first of all, you had a dorm room you spawned into, which you could customize and invite your friends to. Then attached to your dorm room was a door to the rec center, where you could meet people, hang out, throw frisbee, play basketball. It was cool. After that, you could go play sports like paddleball, disc golf, bowling, soccer, dodgeball, all sports that fit the established theme and took place in fitting environments. Then, if you instead wanted to go play PvP, instead of having a game mode that was just a gunfight, it was a paintball gunfight, a real-world social sport people play. Even Rec Royale, their answer to Fortnite, still had a Boy Scouts camping aesthetic to it, which didn't really fit the whole vibe of the game, but it worked well enough because it took place outside, kind of. I mean, even the mystical quest game modes stuck with the theme by having the game imply that they're plays, which I didn't appreciate at the time, but looking back is actually a really cool art and visual direction. And I mean, even the loading screen when you would log in was under a spotlight and seemed to take place in a gym of some sort. The social environment Rec Room created just worked so well in VR, especially with the way they translated typical video game actions into VR, like having to fist bump somebody to party up and then doing the talk to the hand thing to block somebody. Even the menu, you would look at your watch and then a 3D menu would pop up and you'd press 3D buttons. All of it worked so well together. Also, if you combine all that with the fact that this is most people's first social VR experience, it was just the perfect storm for Rec Room to be one of the greatest VR games of the time. Also, I won't dwell on this bit for too long, but it's definitely worth mentioning that the soundtrack was just perfect. I mean, every track they had fit so well with the game. I don't know why, maybe it was the upbeat, kind of groovy nature of the music, but it was just one of those soundtracks that helped make the game. Now, the last big part of Rec Room I haven't mentioned yet was the user-created content. In Rec Room, you could design and build your own rooms and games for people to visit. These games would range from hangout rooms to PvP games to role-playing rooms to horror games. I mean, even just some of the slop a bunch of kids made could still be fun. It was just so much unique content. Now, the way you'd make these games was with a tool called the Maker Pen, and that still fit with the theme we established because it was shaped after a hot glue gun. And without going into much detail, the Maker Pen could place and configure objects. You were able to place all the items from the Rec Room original games, along with the ability to place and scale shapes, and you could even sculpt your own shapes with this paintbrush-like tool. Then if you were making a game in your own room, they had these computer chips that you could wire together, and that's essentially how you programmed whatever you needed to. I found all of this super cool at the time, especially if you combine that with the fact that you could share these rooms to the public. It was awesome and frankly pretty easy to learn. However, there was limits. The ink limit was basically your storage limit for the room. Every time you placed or configured an object, your ink limit would go up a little bit until it was maxed out and then you couldn't place anything anymore. I assume the developers needed to keep the size of these rooms down due to things like load time and the technical abilities of the Quest 1. So this required people to be creative with how they use the Maker Pen and not wasteful, and it resulted in a lot of really creative rooms. Now don't get me wrong, there was a lot of slop. In fact, I created quite a lot of it, but the good absolutely outweighed the bad. The custom PvP rooms were super fun with friends, so were the horror games. I didn't spend much time in the hangout or role-playing rooms, but they were cool if you wanted to meet people. And then every once in a while, you would stumble across a piece of art. I mean, like, the art design of these games was on par with seasoned professionals. I didn't pay much attention to the stories of the games at the time, but looking back, they're a lot better than you'd expect a probably 15-year-old to make. Even some of the bad games were still fun with friends because you could just mess around. I mean, I still think about some of the dumb Rec Room games we played. It was all just a beautiful community of creative people making great games despite the limitations they had. And they did it for fun. They did it out of passion. I mean, every once in a while, someone would do it just because they wanted Rec Room notoriety, but 99% of the time, these users were making games just because they enjoyed creating. And now we're at the point where we talk about how bad Rec Room is now. I think once upon a time, the Rec Room developers were in the same position as these user creators. They seemed to care about making an experience over a product, or at least that's what it used to feel like. It's such a sad story. I still think Rec Room was one of the best VR social experiences out there. I mean, they were innovators. They had to come up with all that stuff. The Oculus Rift CV1 came out in March of 2016, and Rec Room came out 3 months later. Rec Room grew with VR and always seemed to echo the state of the industry, and I still think that's the case. Go log onto Rec Room right now, take a look around, and then decide for yourself whether you think Rec Room is trying to make an enjoyable experience for you and everyone else, or just make money off of little kids. That's the same issue that plagues the VR industry right now. Remember what I said about Rec Room peaking around the release of the Quest 2, and then from there it was a gradual decline? Well, I don't think it was a coincidence. I think it's because the Quest 2 made VR accessible to a lot larger and younger audience, and with that audience, there's money to be made. Like everyone else in the VR industry, Rec Room realized this, and that's where all the game's current problems seem to stem from. Even before the Quest 2, Rec Room tried releasing to non-VR platforms, and then they started catering to non-VR platforms with changes like the most controversial Rec Room update of all time, changing the menu. I mean, remember those 3D buttons? They're gone. We killed them. I mean, they changed the login menu too. What is this? But I think the actual worst Rec Room update was giving the user creators the ability to make money. To do that, creators would add microtransactions to their game, and just like that, all the passionate users making games for fun got flushed out. If you wanted to make money off your Rec Room game, you needed to purchase Rec Room Plus, and then from there you had the ability to add microtransactions to your game. People could then pay with Rec Room tokens or some custom currency you made that you could purchase with Rec Room tokens. And by the way, you could still add custom currencies to your game with the old chip system. You just had to have a slight idea of what you were doing. Anyways, after you earned enough tokens, you could join the Rec Room Creator Program and then exchange them for real money. Then they made it easier to mass produce games by introducing their version of the Roblox Studio. So that way, they can get rid of all of the fun you could have making a game in VR. Then with the Roblox Studio clone came the Roblox game clones. You know, those games that have those ugly computer-generated covers, and then they're called something like How Far Can You Go? And then it's just a crappy auto-clicker style tycoon. By this point, the only thing that made sense for Rec Room was to remove the door to the rec center in your dorm room, replace it with a shortcut to the rooms page on your menu. I mean, they aren't even encouraging people to play the originals anymore. And you know why? It's because they don't make any money. All of these mass-produced slop games are just filled with microtransactions. So the children who are playing these games feel compelled to buy and spend Rec Room tokens. That way Rec Room makes their money so they don't change anything. Then the user creators make their money, so they keep mass producing this stuff, and everybody's happy except for the fans of Rec Room. With Rec Room's new priorities being to maintain this ecosystem, all the soul and character the game had just got buried underneath this monetized content. You can still log into Rec Room and find everything that made the game so great, but the game's so oversaturated now that it doesn't have the same effect anymore. Once upon a time, the Rec Room originals and user-made content could coexist. In fact, they played off each other in a way that made the game better as a whole. You know, back when I would play Rec Room a couple of years ago, or even when I started, I used to get really frustrated when people would call the game a VR Roblox, because it was so much more than that. The game had character, it had soul, and the developers seemed to care about maintaining their game and their community. They were doing something unique and innovating in a new format of media and video games. But now, I don't think there's any better way to describe Rec Room than a VR Roblox. In fact, it's not even a VR Roblox, it's just a Roblox clone with some remnants of a good VR game in there somewhere. I didn't even go into Rec Room's weird new originals that don't have any of the same feel or theme as the old games, or their weird pay-to-use AI robot, or the legs. No, the biggest problem with Rec Room right now and the VR industry as a whole is that everyone's trying to make as much money as they can off of children. And once everybody decides to stop doing that, Rec Room and VR as a whole will start to thrive again. So here's my message to the Rec Room developers. Rec Room will be remembered fondly. In fact, it'll be remembered as one of the greatest VR experiences out there. But it'll only be remembered that way by the lost generation of VR players. You know, like people before the Quest 2 came out. And all those people who still keep up with the game are angered by the current state of it. I know you won't change the game back or get rid of the creator monetization because you're just making too much money. Just know that none of the current Rec Room players who are the same age as I was when I started playing or younger are going to remember the game with any fondness anywhere close to the level that I and many others do. Rec Room is a husk of its former self. Thanks for watching.
Okay, hang on for a sec. I just went to get clips for this video, and I went to the Partner Creator Program website, make sure I got my facts right. But look at this. Okay, so you earn 250,000 tokens, you get 150 bucks. That's cool. But if you make $50,000 off of Rec Room, they give you a golden cape. I'm sorry, but is this not the dumbest shit you've ever seen? This makes me angrier than anything I've seen or talked about in the entire video. Look at this.